Why is there such a huge gap between what we think parenting will be and what it actually is?
If someone had at least told me that and warned me about that before I had kids, I wouldn't have had such shock and shame.
What are the jobs of mums and dads now? What's a dad now he's no longer just a provider? What's a mum now that she often is?
Women were shouldering 2/3 or more of what it took to run a home and family.
Why, when we think having children will bring us closer together, does it so often push us apart? What am I supposed to teach or model for my children when I have no idea what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
You know, it's okay to do it all, but maybe it's not okay for our kids to watch us do it all.
Why did my parents have so much conviction about these things and I have absolutely none? Well, I don't know, but there are some really intelligent people all around the world who've been thinking about this stuff, and they are going to talk to me, and we might not answer all those questions every week, but if we listen to their ideas, maybe we can get some wisdom and some insight, and maybe most importantly, some perspective, and find out what it takes to be a happier parent. The big argument all couples with young children are having is around the division of labor. So this week, I'm talking to Eve Rodsky. Eve is the author of the New York Times bestseller, Fair Play. Fair Play is also a movement which completely changed the cultural conversation around how we view unpaid labor. Eve is cool and funny, and in this conversation, she tells us why this isn't just about productivity or who's doing what. This is actually about our values and our humanity. She also gives us this amazing formula for when we should listen to parental guilt and when we can just push it aside. I hope you enjoy this conversation. You wrote this book. You've created a system to deal with, I think, the big argument that all couples are having when they have young kids around the division of labor. You can't have known that it was going to end up being a movie and a whole system and a movement.
No.
Why? What made you take on this problem?
Thanks, Alex, for asking that question. It definitely is shocking now when I get to stand up and say I'm an expert on the gender division of labor. I'm going to tell you that 1,000,000% that wasn't on my third grade "What do you want to be when you grow up bored?" It did not say expert on the gender division of labor. I think it said astronaut, or veterinarian. And I think more importantly, in law school, I reflect on this a lot. Elizabeth Warren, who's now a senator in America and out of Massachusetts, she was a professor at Harvard Law School at the time when I was there. This was when I started, so 2000. And she asked us, what do we want to do with our law degree? I think, not ironically, I said I was going to be a senator from New York, president of the United States, and not miss my chance to audition for the Knicks City Dancers. That's my beloved NBA basketball team. So I think it's important to understand that I thought I was going to be smashing glass ceilings one after one after one. But what I'm here to tell you realistically, like so many of us, the only thing I can really tell you if you cut to my life 10 years later that I was smashing was, like peas for my toddler, Zach, while I was breastfeeding a baby Ben, desperately trying to negotiate how to get back to a corporate job that was hostile to me and didn't want me back, had taken away all my direct reports, told me if I wanted to continue breastfeeding, it would have to be in a broom closet and I'd have to bring my own battery pack. And then on top of that, as you know from my story, my husband Seth sends me, this infamous text that I talk about a lot. I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries. And the breakdown that I still remember in 2011, to have a breakdown over my husband Seth sending me, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries" text, was an understanding that I was alone. I was a lawyer who had big dreams. I was a woman who had been told she can have it all, not by doing it all. That wasn't the secret that I heard, that men who were my peers that I was attracted to and dating and ultimately married were feminists or believed in my right to equal life to them. And so I think it's really important to understand that nobody thinks this is going to happen to them, I don't think. And for me, it was this breakdown of crying on the side of the road when Seth was thinking I was the fulfiller of his smoothie needs, and understanding that at that moment, if I reflected on it, that women were shouldering 2/3 or more of what it took to run a home and family. And I guess I felt that if I had known that, Alex, if someone had at least told me that and warned me about that before I had kids, when I got married, then I think I wouldn't have had such shock and shame and sadness and anger at that moment when I had 2 little kids, and my life would have been better. And so maybe because I never wanted anybody else to ever feel that way, I was willing to share my own story.
You think people are not having kids because people now know? Do you think
Yes.
the message is getting out there and that's what's causing the fall in birth rates?
I do. I mean, I'm not a megalomaniac to say I think coming out with a message 5 years ago that actually illuminated how much labor it takes to run a home and family is the reason why. But speaking of, I wasn't going to go into this, but I think there's a couple things happening. I think we're all waking up to how unfair it is. And it just made me think of this awesome man from Korea. But I want to read this to you because I think it gives a really good context or that question about falling birth rates. South Korea is the country that now is being highlighted the most for having the most dramatic fall in birth rates. And he says, this young father, "Dear Miss Rodsky, I read your book, Fair Play Project, and luckily it's translated into Korean. Write this message to express gratitude for you. I bought this book as one of the husbands in the world, and I confess I thought I'm a fairly good husband, but I was wrong. That's not the point of fair play to shame, but I just think that was a funny statement. I strongly believe everybody must read this book before they got married or have a baby. Personally, I lost my sister, who was a high court judge and a mother of 2 elementary student sons 4 years ago. It was because of cerebral hemorrhage stroke took her. I believe this disease exploded as she worked too hard and handled too much things during her father-in-law's death, which was just a week before her death. She took care of too many things as a full-time worker and a perfectionist judge. I think if this Fair Play Project were spread over the whole of Korea and every husband executes this project, my sister would still be with us, having a balanced life with her smiling face, which I terribly, terribly miss." It still gets to me, Alex, because I think that's what people are seeing. I think people are seeing the loved ones around them struggle so hard because it's so hard to be a parent these days. And it's so intense. And in this case, obviously, it was fatal. But that's why I'm so happy to talk to you today, because I think a lot of people contextualize this work. Alex, I'm always on these productivity podcasts or productivity top 10 lists. Yes, Fair Play, what we'll talk about today, is a productivity tool. But really what it is a reevaluation of what our values are and what we care about as human beings. Because this is not just unpaid labor we're talking about today. Every single one of the Fair Play cards that we'll talk about today has a story. There are humanity. And I think the more we talk about it that way, we'll realize that we have to start prioritizing care. And then I think we'll see the birth rates rise again.
In that gentleman's message to you there, the stakes couldn't be higher, right? We're talking about people dying. And I think we can all see that. We can all see women in particular getting sick. Fair Play is written to a woman. It assumes that the reader is a woman who's married to a man. I'd love to hear the pitch for men. Apart from the obvious, don't let your wife die. What's in it for men?
Oh my God, everything, Alex. It's such a love letter to men because the men that I talk to are you. They're wonderful. I don't have trolls. I don't have people saying, go back into the kitchen. That's just not the community that this book resonates with. What we get is curious men who, one couple said to me that what Fair Play taught them was that his wife, she didn't have a magical vagina that whispered in her ear what his mother wanted for Christmas. That's one of my favorite quotes. I kept it on a Post-it for so long because I'm like, yes, that's all I care, Alex, is that you don't think I have a magical vagina, right? That you know that this is work. Even if it didn't change, just knowing that it's work to in-laws management is a card. It's for your listeners who are not familiar with them. There are 100 cards. The goal is to divide up the cards based on ownership. Because what I think I'd ask men to do, first, understand that a Harvard project that's been going on for 75 years, what they were able to find over 75 years when they control for everything, Alex, smoking, age, genetics, ethnicity, class, they were able to see that they could predict whether a man was alive at 85 based on just one thing. It was the quality of a man's relationships at 55. And so the stakes are high for men too, because you don't get anything for free. And so that's what I want to say to men. It feels painful when you hear, oh, there is a system or a book that may highlight that I do less than my partner, or there is a system or a book out there that's angry, or there's a system or a book out there that may cause disruption because maybe ignorance is bliss. But what I will say to you is that the more you invest in the 3 things that make a successful organization, the better you are. And those 3 things we found now over 15 years of me doing this work are the same things that work for any organization. And that's boundaries, systems, communication. And so that's what I would say to men. If you believe me that even my Aunt Marian's fucking Mahjong group has more clearly defined expectations in the home, you literally, Alex, you don't bring snack twice to that group, you're out. Like, do you want to be less efficient than Aunt Marian's Mahjong group? Like, that is just not how we want to live our lives. Why would you want to ask your partner who fed the dog every day for the next 40 years? I mean, that literally sounds like absolute hell. It could be a dystopian movie. What boundary systems communication does is it creates a lot more efficiency and time for you to do the things that you love and you want. So that's my value proposition to men. A, understand investing in relationships is your life and death. And B, when you invest in systems, then what happens is you get more time back for the things that you love to do without guilt and shame. And so I think that that's great for the relationship too.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say to men that this isn't a book that is unkind to men.
No.
It's not. And
it's triggering to men because they've never heard women, I think, tell their stories. A lot of men say to me, you know, I was willing to listen to your female anger because the second half of the book was so helpful to my partner and me. I was like, thank you for willing to listen to my anger.
Find listening to your anger, at least that you're not specifically angry with me.
Right.
Like, it's much easier than listening to my wife's anger, which is very much directed at me. I'm like, oh, okay, no, this is everyone.
We're normal. If anything, it should make you feel like, oh my gosh, wait, were they on my Nest camera yesterday listening to our fights? Right. I mean, we're all doing this. And you know what's interesting? It's not just America. It's not just Canada. It's not just the UK. This is happening in the Nordic countries too, where everybody keeps saying, oh, their division of labor is perfect. Spoiler alert, it's not. They say this is happening in mainland China, as we know. It's happening in South Korea. This is such a universal problem that in a way, sometimes knowing that may feel better because it's less shame. If everybody is struggling with this, then you know that you're not alone. I think that that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a gift that our generation has that our parents' generation didn't, where we don't have to pretend marriage is flawless. Like, you know, my mum would never say a bad word about my dad to anyone. It would be breaking ranks, whereas we're pretty open.
Well, yeah, as my husband says, when people say to him, you know, okay, well, you stayed together and your division of labor is a lot more fair. He just says, well, just have your wife write a book about you that portrays you in a terrible light.
I want to get into the details of how the cards and everything work. Just kind of linking back to that, the piece about what's in it for men. You start your research with this really large group of women and you're putting together this shit I do list.
Yep.
You know, I'm on a group of men, and actually the overriding emotion there isn't anger. It is genuine confusion.
Mm-hmm.
There's some real bafflement, and it's because we don't understand the invisible labor. You've given us this vocabulary for it, but it was such a cause of issue in my marriage. It was like, what do you mean? I've done, I get really defensive. Like, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. But it wasn't until I understood the CPE, conception, planning, and execution, that I could understand that I was just doing the execution bits. So maybe you could just take us through CPE and how so important.
Yes, I think that really has been the key insight, I think, for so many people, which I love, because it's actually really easy to implement once you know that, or at least it's easy to see. Sadly, I could design my day job is I'm a lawyer. I look at the world as, if you want to get people to stop at a stop sign, you don't politely ask each person in a line to stop at the stop sign, right? You pass a law to tell them to stop at the stop sign. So I was doing this for these big families. You can imagine them. They're on our TV shows, helping them give their family businesses and their family foundations to the next generation. That's why I think I resonate a lot with men, because I'm pretty analytical about these issues. I look at them through a lens of science and data, and we have 50 years of organizational management science. What I did was I took the conventional wisdom, which I hated, which was, if you're so overwhelmed, just ask Seth for help. I took that, or just make a list. So I did that, as you said. I created a should I do spreadsheet. It took me 9 months. I got to speak to women all over the world. It was before you had a podcast like you, or before TikTok. It was early Facebook. This was 2011 and 2012. But once I got this beautiful data, I had 98 tab Excel spreadsheet, super granular. And I was asking women, what do you do that takes more than 2 minutes of your time that's invisible to your partner? And I was getting things like, under my medical and healthy living tab, Alex, like the application of sunscreen for 2 minutes. But then women would chime in, well, what about the 30 minutes for the chase? And I'd be like, oh my God, I forgot the 30 minutes for the chase, right? So very, very granular. But I didn't know what to do. So when I finally got this should I do spreadsheet done, the conventional wisdom at the time was to make a list for my partner, which probably would have been terrible for you, for all men. I apologize if anyone's ever done that to you. It's so emasculating. It's so horrible to be at the receiving end of no context and just a list. So I do this to Seth. I send him a can't wait to discuss. He gets this crazy spreadsheet. He has no fucking clue what it is. Just all these things that he could tell us, but I spent a lot of time compiling. And he's like, what is this? Did not lead to a good response. Just like a see no evil. Do not ever want to see anything like this again. But instead of making me angry at Seth, what it made me realize was that I was living a lie. Nobody in 2011 could tell me the truth, which is that lists alone don't work. They're not helpful to the person who gets the list, and they're not helpful to the person making the list. So if they don't work, what works? Well, systems do. So to develop the Fair Play system, I had to ask a question that was life-changing. And it was because, Alex, like you said, it was because of men. When I started to ask men about the should I do spreadsheet, who takes the kids to school, who handles the medical for the kids, who is dealing with groceries, men were saying we both handle it. But what I was hearing from their partner is, oh, he does nothing. I do it all. And I was like, but I don't think these men are delusional. Like there's some data problem here. So then I realized my question was the wrong question. It wasn't who's handling X. It was, how does mustard get in your refrigerator? Once I asked that question, it was like the best social science when everything breaks open. And then what I got to hear, and it was confirmed by the men as well, as you said earlier, what I was able to hear in Switzerland, Sweden, mainland China, Japan, Vietnam, US, South America, everywhere, it was the same. Women, if you look at it on a project management, like sort of racy framework, okay, this is an organization, let's put this on a project management framework and break it out. Oh, you're the one that notices your second son likes yellow mustard because he doesn't eat his protein? Oh, that's conception. Okay, I can put that on this project management framework. Oh, woman, you're the one who is monitoring the mustard for when it runs low, and you're getting stakeholder buy-in from Alex and your kids for what they need on the grocery list. Okay, that's planning. I know that. Oh, okay. So you said both because Alex goes to the store, right? And you bring home spicy Dijon every fucking time, Alex. And I asked you for yellow mustard. And Alex, I'm sorry, I'm not going to trust you because you can't even bring home the right type of mustard. So that race to the bottom It's not really about the mustard. It was about the two things that I always say in my day job is what you need for a healthy organization are accountability and trust. They were being eroded because we weren't living in an ownership mindset. So that was such a key piece of insight for me that I kept testing it and testing it over years and years. So finally Fair Play came out and I was confident it worked. And now 5 years later, we actually have the quantitative data to show that it works. But the core is what you just said. It is understanding that an entire task and ownership mindset is the conception, planning, and execution of a task. It does not mean you have to hold it forever, that task. But what I devised is I gave you 100 cards. You don't need to play with them all. But what I say to you is consider what it means to own the full task. Include a minimum standard of care. If you're owning dinner, that means you're not asking your wife, babe, what should I make, right? You're owning that meal. And there's a minimum standard of care. In my home, Seth has added the minimum standard of care because I hate vegetables. I grew up on bodega food on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I eat a lot of processed foods. I never thought to add a vegetable. He kept saying, on your dinner nights, our minimum standard of care, there has to be some sort of protein and some vegetable on a plate.
So let's stick with that example of dinner just so I can get everyone to understand. So we have the conception, which is the meal. What am I going to cook? I'm not going to ask you. If I hold this card, I'm going to conceive of what the meal is, and I'm going to make sure it's something that the kids will eat. I'm not going to cook like a kind of eel pie or something.
Yes.
And I'm going to plan it. I'm going to make sure it's ready for a certain time. Am I buying the stuff for it, or that's a different card?
Well, that's groceries. But what you're doing is you're either getting in the planning portion of the other person holding the groceries card, you're asking for what you need for that week. Or if you hold that card yourself, then you can do it. But yes, groceries is actually a separate card, but you could always combine it. A lot of times people will say, I'm the dinner provider for this week. And then next week, my wife is traveling.
Regardless, if I'm not holding groceries, it's my job as the planning to get my menu to the grocery person.
Correct.
I need to make sure I've got it by that time. And then execution is I make the meal.
Correct.
And I think what's really interesting listening to you talk about your lawyer background is you're so strict in the book about messing with this formula. You're like, you do not split up CPE. You do not have someone do the conception of the planning, someone else else, because it doesn't work. Like, I'm like reading it like, whoa, okay. You don't double down. You don't say, oh, we'll both just do it because it doesn't work. So you've got this professional rigor that you're bringing to the domestic situation. And that's what makes it work, right?
Because it doesn't work when you split it up. That's what, because that's the status quo. So if people want to say to me, yes, I need to be more flexible and ask my partner, then I say, then at least be intentional about it. When you play this Fair Play system and you own cards, the way that it was done before is typically assumption, and it's typically 3 toxic words, Alex. It's figure it out. We'll figure it out. That was the most common response I heard over 10 years when people were about to have a child. How are you going to handle the division of labor in your home? Most couples said to me, we're going to figure it out. Unfortunately, what that means is that either you're doing it the way your parents did it, or you're giving feedback in the moment, or it's highly inefficient because you're both doing everything, or you don't know. As one man said to me, he's a systems analyst, but in his home, he said every single night for years, they would say, who's taking the dog out right before it's about to take a piss on the rug. And he's like, it's the strangest thing. It's like in a million years, if I'm a systems analyst, and people are afraid of that term, but the way I define a system is just, it helps you decide what to do before you have to do it. So it allows you to do things when there's low emotion, high cognition. So to me, part of the system is it's much easier to plan for low emotion, high cognition in advance if you're the full owner. That's all. So if you don't need somebody else to step in on your step, it's a lot easier. And your partner really, I'll give you one quick example because didn't get into the book, but I think it's a fun one. It's very small. But I think you recognize the nuance, Alex, of how the small changes and like even understanding CPE can really change a marriage and a relationship. There's this couple in the pandemic, but what was interesting, so again, let's go back to the Fair Play cards. For your listeners who are not familiar with them, there are 100 cards. They were derived from the Should I Do spreadsheet. The goal is to divide up the cards based on ownership. Not yet. If you're listening to Alex for the first time, you've never heard this before, you're not doing that yet. You're just listening. You're going to maybe listen to this and just live with CPE. Just think about it. Just stew on it. You're not going to go into dividing anything yet if you've never heard this before, because this is a completely new way of thinking and doing. So let's just say, trigger warning, this is a 101. So this couple was more advanced in the fair play world. They were ready. They had decent communication and decent boundaries. And so when they played this game, the 100 cards, there's a home suit, an out suit, a caregiving suit, and a magic suit. The reason why I do that is because one of the toxic things couples say to each other is, if you're so overwhelmed, just get help. And so I want people to understand that even if you did have a lot of extra help, there's 50 cards after children that are still not outsourceable. So of the suits, what they realized was that Richard was really, really good at the home suit. Amazing at the bins, amazing at dishes, really good cook, really wonderful Sunday farmer's market shopper. Like, loved this guy. So good. But he actually recognized for himself that he had no ownership of any of the caregiving or magic cards. So those are cards like medical and healthy living, like, knowing that your child's dentist, when those appointments are, grooming, haircuts, and magic. One of the cards is called Magical Beings, and that's like Santa, Leprechaun, Tooth Fairy.
Yeah.
So he decides to take on the Tooth Fairy, but it's during COVID, late COVID, and you can imagine what happens, right? So the Tooth Fairy doesn't come. So what I love about this couple and how they reflect on playing fair play is that the first thing they say is they talk about their communication, what it would have been before fair play. So remember, Dick initially took on this card with ownership. He didn't do it. So part of fair play, as I said, you carry through your mistake. What was so beautiful was that the minute the daughter came in saying, there's no Tooth Fairy, whatever, he says immediately, my bad, like I fucked up. Amy reflects on the fact that because he said that, she was able to back off. He reflected that before fair play, he would have said, well, why didn't you remind me to put the dollar under the pillow? And then she would have been like, go fuck yourself. I hate you. You ruined my child's magic. This was a small change, but a huge change in my mind is the fair play person watching them. He takes accountability. She backs off. And then she says, carry through your mistake. Then he tells me he emails toothfairy@gmail.com. During his workday, he gets a response. He shows it to his daughter. It says, I'm so sorry I didn't make it. During COVID, there's supply chain issues with me picking up teeth. He explains like what that means, why it's different in COVID, why she used to always come, but now she's blocked and can't always come. And that when she comes late, she brings double the money. And that's it.
Beautiful.
That's the story. That's it. That's how fair play works.
I've got to tell the story of how I found out the Tooth Fairy wasn't real.
Please.
Because my mum was away and I woke up and there was a £20 note under my pillow. And I was like, oh, it's Dad. Yeah, that's definitely Dad. Yeah.
That's
no idea. 20 quid. Was that wicked?
Yes. And that is like, during our generation, like now that's
it was
still
a lot.
That's a lot of money. Oh my God. Yeah. I think I got like a penny or something.
But I think what's really interesting about that is, again, it's a professional thing, right? It's accountability. And, when this stuff has worked with me and Eloise, it's exactly that. It's like, oh, I've not done that. And I need to actually, before I get caught out, even be like, do you know what? I said I'd do this thing with the kids and I've totally messed it up. And that shows that trust can stay, right?
Yes.
And then there can still be trust. She can rely on me to do it next time. She can rely on me to do the other stuff. And
but I love
enormous.
how you just connected accountability to trust, because I think a lot of people don't realize that accountability is like one of the foundational ways that we can trust. People taking accountability is really the key to repair, right? Because think about even the best apologies, right? Well, I did this because you did that, right? No, when you say to somebody like, I messed up, like, period, it's hard to hate them after that. Or to say, like, I slept through the tooth fairy last night. Like, I feel really bad about that, but don't worry, I'm going to carry through my mistake. Because we're all going to make mistakes, right? It doesn't mean the person, the default, the she-fault person doesn't make a ton of mistakes. But it just means that we both are giving each other a little bit more grace. And I think the biggest key to me in that small story of their behavior change was how Richard first just said, I messed up. Like, I messed up. There's just such power, because what do you say when somebody says that? You can't then go hot and say, you've ruined our child's life. It just doesn't feel like it follows. What follows to say you ruined our child's life and you're the worst father ever is if somebody says, you should have reminded me to put the dollar under the pillow. That defensiveness.
I'm interested to ask you as a mediator, right? What that takes, that vulnerability of being like, do you know what? I messed up. That takes you to not be at war. Yeah. And there's a kind of problem for certain couples that fair play and so much of what's good for couples takes you not being in that point scoring headspace. Yeah. How do you get a couple out of that who don't want to climb down? Neither of them want to climb down.
Such a great question. You know what I'd like to do in that situation, Alex? Because obviously it's easier the less kids you have, the earlier in the relationship where you learn this system. Or as my lovely Korean partner who's young and saw what happened to his sister. What I think is the best way is if you're really up on that high horse of just scorekeeping, or maybe like your resentmeter is like at 10 and you're not feeling like you can even come to the table. That's why I wrote a whole second book called Unicorn Space. Because I think people have forgotten what the value proposition of the life is that we're supposed to be building together. We get on a treadmill of being a parent, a partner, and a professional over and over again. And we lose the sense of really, I think, a lot of our identity in becoming our roles. This happens to men a lot because you're defined as the primary breadwinner, or just a lot of boxes that a lot of men, I think, feel really uncomfortable in when they want to be caregivers and not just quote unquote providers. I think women get boxed in because we're seen as sort of these caretakers. So what I love about my second book is that it's really an exploration of like, who is Alex? What is Alex's values? And not Alex's boring values, not that health and family are not important. Really the antidote to burnout, to sort of this languishing that we're talking about, breaking those patterns, means that you believe you and your partner deserve to be consistently interested in your own lives. And so I'd love to inspire people to say, like, I want you to have equal time to do that so that you're both proud of each other because you're both doing experiences that are like, I can't believe I just did that. Maybe it was your first podcast, right? When you had curiosity, connection, you had to complete and upload an episode. Though, whether you make $1 or $1 billion from it, there's something special in having these episodes of what I call eudaimonic well-being. So that's what I like to say. If you're stuck, I'd say I'd rather people just move off of fair play and say, look, we're not going to get there yet. But instead, am I interested in my own life? Am I consistently interested in my own life? Is my partner consistently interested in their own life? And how can I get them there? That's sort of when you're stuck. That's the question I like to ask.
What I really got the second time I read the book was actually that this eudaimonic thinking is the culmination of the whole game, right? It's the purpose behind the whole fair play system is to get to this. Is that harder for women than it is for men?
Yes,
societally?
It is. Societally, for sure. But I will say something about men. No man said to me, I want my wife to be resentful or die. Like that wasn't what I was hearing. What I was hearing was things like, well, yeah, I need to take Sundays off, to play golf or to run because I'm the breadwinner and that's really hard, right? So I think there was just a real reaction to try to protect your own time because there's so little of it. And so then that's where the scorekeeping comes, right? It's like, well, why am I home if you're getting to go out and play golf for 7 rounds? And like, I didn't get any time to see my friends and you're always this and so it becomes a war of time where it's a zero-sum game. So that's why I like to say fair play is really beautiful because it creates efficiency for you both to get time back. But even if you're not going to do fair play first and you're going to go to what I call the eudaimonic, even for men who did know what I call their unicorn space is, like that's the space for curiosity, connection, and completing things outside of your roles as a parent, partner, professional. I call it unicorn space, not because as you can see, I'm analytical and a lawyer. I don't love like unicorns, but I think it's like a magical being. It's mythical.
So not a unicorn person.
Right. I'm not a unicorn person, but it's mythical and it's magical, but it doesn't fucking exist. That's why I call it a unicorn. Like we have to conjure it. And so what happens is even for men who do take the time for themselves, often their partner doesn't. So they're coming back to a resentful, mean human being. Or what happens is when I say, are you proud of your partner? They will say this to me, Alex, and it's very sad. They say, well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't do it without her. Like she's everything. So I'm like, okay, that's a personal assistant. Let's keep going. Well, she is the best. She used to run McKinsey or she used to run marathons. And I was like, wait, so we're talking about why you're proud of your wife before children 20 years ago? Like what's happening? Like, are you proud of your partner now? And so it was sort of scaring me because men couldn't come up with reasons that they were proud, that they took pride in their partner outside of their roles. When women have unicorn space, men are the coolest. There's a man I spoke to in Colorado whose wife was a stay-at-home mom, and then she was sort of languishing and stuck, and she decided that the opposite of stuck is racing cars in Mexico. So she's become like the biggest, like badass Carrera Americana car racer. She owns a vintage Porsche and she races all over every continent. When I asked this man if he's proud of his partner, it's like they're teenagers, Alex. I mean, I want to cry just thinking about the things he said about her. She's fearless. No one's ever done this before. She started at 56. Our daughter's her manager. I'm not saying we all have to be Renee. Shout out to Renee. We love you out there. Continue to race. But there's such a spark that I think people get when they have a partner that's consistently interested in their own lives, that it was so worthwhile for me that I felt like it was his own value proposition.
We're talking about values and people finding their own and unicorn space. And I think what you really highlighted there is that unicorn space is not selfish. But,
No.
This lights up your partner as well. And I think that's an amazing thing. But
how about mental health? Can I just say one more thing about that?
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
care about the mental health of your partner and you? What I'm saying to all of us in the fair play universe is that it's not selfish. Because what mental health is having appropriate emotions at appropriate times and yet having the ability and strength to weather those emotions, Alex. So the problem is, I think after kids, we have a lot of appropriate emotions to our partner and our kids, which is like anger, resentment, what the fuck, just overwhelm, boredom. We have them at appropriate times, which is a lot of the day. But the way we weather them, when we don't have this belief that it's not selfish to invest in ourselves, is we typically are weathering them through mommy juice or alcohol, edibles, emotional eating, doom scrolling, just, again, not habits that you really want to see invest. You don't want to invest in those habits for a long-term life of health and happiness with a partner. So that's what I wanted to say.
I also think I see, in the same way that you see, men throwing themselves into work to an unhealthy degree and workaholism or alcoholism or whatever. I think I see mumaholics.
Absolutely.
Who cannot find, who don't want to find, that they're stuck like chasing this thing that they're never gonna get, this kind of ideal. And
yes, exactly. A perfectly wrapped gift to a birthday party and Instagram lunches and school service. I always say women, like, do not volunteer for your PTA. And yes, it's harder because you could be punished for it as a woman in your social circles and your society and by your in-laws and by everybody, to be honest. But that's why I created the Fair Play movement, to fight back against that. Because yes, it becomes an addiction.
And the reason I used to have this kind of ongoing row where she'd be like, how have I ended up being in charge of everything? And I'd be like, are you kidding? There's kind of elements of the universe you don't want to be in charge of, which was very funny. But really,
yes.
What we got to the bottom of was that she didn't want to, but she felt she should be.
Yeah.
And that was a massive revelation. So how do we cut through the shoulds of parenting? And let's be honest, there's a lot more of them for mums than there are for dads. How do we cut through those shoulds to find the things that we want for ourselves and for our families? How do we choose which cards to get rid of?
Oh, I can give you that some to get rid of. I don't want anybody doing holiday cards. I don't want anybody volunteering for their PTAs until we have gender parity there and it's valued more. So no, I think, yes, part of the beauty is coming together as a team to understand that it doesn't help to be at war with each other. But I think this is something that really helped me a lot. And I talk about this with Dr. Becky, who's a parenting expert, because we have similar views of guilt and shame. So should is a guilt signifier. I should do that. And what really guilt and shame is something different than we experience it, Alex. And so I think if we actually understand what true guilt is, what it was supposed to be used for evolutionarily versus the should of societal expectations, then we can help each other really get rid of more guilt and shame than we have been so far. Real guilt is something that's out of alignment with your values. So if you yell at, say, your cab driver on the way to the airport because they're going too slow, and you're like, God damn, just get me to the airport faster, take a different route. When you get there, you're like, I really shouldn't have yelled at that guy. He was trying his best, right? That's sort of out, because Alex doesn't yell at people. I don't yell at people who are trying their best. That's a guilt response. That's an appropriate guilt response. When something's in alignment with your values and you still feel guilty about not doing it, that's not guilt. What that is anticipating other people's discomfort.
I guess the question that immediately springs to mind is, how do we tell the difference between those two? Because that would be the gold, right?
Yes, right. So but the beauty is even knowing that that's the question. So for example, there are times when I'm like, oh my God, it's my son's birthday, but I can go on a trip when I'm speaking about my book. It lights me up. So I will say, I feel guilty that I'm leaving for my son's birthday is not the right way to frame that. What I'm saying to myself is I'm anticipating my discomfort and not being there for my son. I'm anticipating my husband's discomfort, that I'm not going to be there for my son for his birthday, my child's discomfort. So I can anticipate that discomfort and say that that's valid. But I can still choose to go, because both things were in alignment with my values. And so instead of saying I feel guilty, which will stop me from doing that automatically, what I say is these are both in alignment with my values. What do I want to choose? And I'm not going to let other people's discomfort enter that decision. I can anticipate it and feel bad for it and deal with it. Alex, thank you so much for handling Zach's birthday this year. This is very rare for me. I don't want to not be there. I'm going to write a card. I'll send like a fun balloongram. We'll do something next weekend. I can anticipate and help with that. But I think it's important because it helps you make the decision on an even playing field. Whereas now what often happens is because of the shoulds of somebody else, we change our decision making. And then if you do that in the moment, then you regret it later. And that's where resentment comes. So that's a really important distinction. It's nuanced, but it's really, really helped me.
Yeah, that's
and I
really
say
good.
that for my partner too. Like my husband said that today. Like my son has a volleyball game. They're in season. He felt guilty going to see the Lakers tonight, but Luka is on the Lakers and they're playing the Mavericks in their first game since this horrific trade that the entire United States was talking about. And so, of course, you don't feel guilty. I have no idea
what any of these words mean.
You'll look it up. The entire U.S. was talking about a horrific trade that the Dallas Mavericks did to the LA Lakers. There's a game tonight to watch the new player go back to and play his old team. So what I said to Seth, and I just reminded him, like, that's not guilt, right? That's just anticipating Zach's discomfort. It's in your value system. It's in your alignment of your values to be with your best friend who got you these tickets. You only he lives far away now. You see him about once a month. You don't have as many close friendships as like I do. Invest in those friendships. So that's sort of how we work through those.
I really love that.
Conversations.
Yeah. And anticipate the discomfort of other people's shoulds, but you can make it. Yeah, I think that's really
Oh my
great.
God. And my in-laws' discomfort really gets me, Alex. So their discomfort will make me do
things. I think that's universal.
That I don't want to do. So if I can say to myself, this is going to really make my in-laws uncomfortable, like writing a book about their son, by the way. And I still did it because it was in alignment with my values. And to this day, I feel like it was worth it. You know,
Yeah,
I always do.
Seriously, thank you for going through with that. I wanted to give you a hypothetical question, but something that I think is coming up for so many women at the moment. Let's say you've got a mum whose child has just turned 1. She's doing the maths. She can go back to work and she's adding it up. And she's like, actually, do you know what? After I go back, I'm only going to be coming away with $50 a week, actually, after the childcare. You're Eve Rodsky. What should I do, Eve?
Well, all I can say is that that's called present bias. And again, I talk maybe too analytical for some people, but I did give some storytelling today, so I'll do both. I'm going to go analytical economics here. Too many people view the present as the most important thing. We don't anticipate our futures. So when you're looking at that calculation, it's for right now. But what you're not taking into account is a couple of things. One, by staying in the workforce, you're going to get raises over time. 2, having a dual income is much better. God forbid you have a wild card, which is in the fair play system, there's 10 cards that are wild cards, like your partner loses their job, someone gets sick. So having a secondary income is really, really important. And third, most importantly, is that there's really, 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 really important benefits in economic power. And I don't mean just to leave a toxic relationship. I mean in the pride that your partner sees in you. So it doesn't even have to be something where it's equal in dollar amount. But there is something really, really beautiful when you can take pride in a monetary contribution to the home. There is a power dynamic we see. And the reason why I say this importantly is because I support a lot of my friends out there who write books on pausing and how hard it is. So let's just call a spade a spade. A lot of people don't even have public schools in America anymore, Alex. So there are women dropping out of the workforce to homeschool their kids. During the pandemic, we lost 30 to 40 years of women's labor force participation because their job was considered secondary earning. I'm not saying that you have to be in a dual earner couple. I'm not saying that always has to be the case. But what I am saying is that if you look at it as just a childcare equation, you're missing out on the power dynamics, your future earnings. As economists, we like to talk about the utility curve of life, where that's not just measured by how much you make. There's a utility in feeling productive member of society and using your degree. So what I would say is, as long as people are having the right type of conversations, we actually have a lot of resources to have these conversations, Alex, on our website. We're now a nonprofit. It's called fairplaypolicy.org. So if people are saying that to themselves, go onto our website. We have a prenup and postnup checklist that sort of analyzes whether or not you should leave the workforce to take care of your kids.
Wow. Okay. You sort of developed a tool to help people answer that question.
Because it's such a common question, like you said. So it makes me crazy when people just equate childcare to their wages. The other real problem with that, if you want to get into the granular details of the logical fallacy of that, is that really technically you should be comparing half of your wages to the childcare. and half of your partner's
Right.
wages, right?
Yes, exactly. You're
So
both
that's
working,
another.
so the
Yes.
childcare is off both of you.
It should be off both of you. So that's also just a economic calculation failure.
Yeah, there's also, I don't know, there's this kind of idealization around both work and both childcare that kind of comes up where they both got, like being at home with a child all day is tough, man. I mean, like
I would never do it.
can't remember COVID.
No, I don't.
Well, we were all drinking too much, weren't we?
We,
But,
yes. And eating banana bread. I gained like 20 pounds in COVID. But I will say that exactly, we've found really fun studies that show people would rather get a root canal, that people were more excited about getting a root canal than they were about a Saturday having to watch their kids by themselves.
Wow.
How fun does a root canal sound, Alex?
Yeah.
You get to sit there with your podcast, a long form podcast on.
There's
you
drugs.
Get some laughing gas. Yes, exactly.
I did the cards. My wife and I did the cards relatively recently before Christmas. We actually had a massive row after dealing them out. Over
By the way, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes
it was a good row.
Yeah.
I'm glad we had it, and it was over the tidy card, which was kind of 15 years of resentment represented in one card. So there needed to be a row. I mean, your kind of fair play negotiations with Seth must look like the United Nations. You've been doing it so long, must be total experts. I'm really interested in what you guys argue about.
The big cards, Alex, the existential cards, AKA one of them right now is electronics and IT and social media and friendships. Like you said, we've gotten our checklist down. We have a check-in every week. We talk when emotion is low, cognition is high. It's the existential things. So I'll give you an example. I held the social media friendship card and electronics and IT 2 years ago. So I bought a phone for Ben because all of his other friends had a phone and he sort of needed it to enter 7th grade. We didn't realize he was going to become literally addicted to TikTok. So now I said to Seth, I need you to take over this card. And he's like, I don't work with arsonist firefighters. Like, you can't create a fire and then want me to put it out. So no matter what I do, every week we come to the table and I say, I can't control Ben's screen time use. He figures out all these ways around it. I have done everything. We've hired an electronic consultant. My friend recommended we get a different Wi-Fi network. I'm like, I can't deal with that, but he can always get around it. And so I said, I really need you to handle this. Either grab his phone at 7 at night or take it. I don't want him to have the screen time use. And then he'll just come back to the table to sit in the next week. You're an arsonist firefighter. If you hadn't given him a phone, this wouldn't have happened. So we're in that back and forth right now of things like that, where yes, a parent can make a bad decision, but how long do you penalize that parent and not help them if they made a bad decision? So those are the things we continue to fight about.
Yeah, and I guess one of the big takeaways actually from everyone I speak to on the podcast is that in a marriage, there's no such thing as my problems and your problems.
Right, that's what I keep saying. Like,
this is our problem, man.
It's our problem, right? So for some reason, but I
get why he doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah, he finally got him to admit that he is like, I actually don't know how to deal with this. What ended up happening was I kept ownership of the card, and I deleted Ben's app store. And unfortunately, every night I have to check his screen time to make sure he didn't reinstall TikTok.
Yeah,
a lot of emotional labor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of emotional labor, but I think it's really good to hear, an expert saying that there's just some things with kids that are not solvable
Fixable.
Problems.
No,
they're not, and it's really, I think that's really hard as a parent. So, I can't solve this for you. We're gonna have to find different ways to work with it. I guess I just want to say thank you just for giving me the time, but also for tackling this topic with such rigor in a way that is kind of understandable for everyone, and has made my lives better, and my marriage better, and maybe a better father and a more connected one. And there's so much in this for everyone.
Well, thank you. This was such a great conversation. And, I love that we started with sort of the emotional plea of that man in Korea, because I think ending on the fact that this will make us, it's okay to do it all, but maybe it's not okay for our kids to watch us do it all. And these negotiations between couples, it's not just who does what, it's our humanity.
I really hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. All Eve's stuff is on her website, Fair Play Life. You've got her books, Fair Play and Unicorn Space, and the card system. All the cards are available on the website. As she said, they're a non-profit now. So there's loads of tools up on there for free. Please check that out. If you'd like to support me and the podcast, please look for Be a Happier Parent on Patreon. And please subscribe and follow the podcast. And I will see you all next week.